Lieutenant Colonel Maxim Levy. Today I'm the Deputy Commander of the Fire Support and Artillery School in the IDF, which is also an operational artillery regiment. I'm 38 years old, married, and have two beautiful children. First of all, I would like to say that I'm proud and excited that I have been given the opportunity to come here and speak to such a lovely and warm community on behalf of all the soldiers in the IDF. I've been serving for 20 years in the Army as a commander, and through my whole service I have been exposed to what Yachad for the soldiers is doing for all parts of the Army, but especially for soldiers from unprivileged families or lonely soldiers that live in Israel without their family and serve in the Army. I'll start by a little bit about myself. I was born in Bulgaria. I did Aliyah with my family when I was 6 years old, and today I live in a small village in the northern part of Israel in the Galil. I graduated economics and management as a first degree and national security as a second degree, both during my military service. I started my military service in the artillery corps, and as a young officer, when I was a platoon and battery commander, I served throughout all the borders of Israel, including the time the IDF was still in Lebanon. In 2002, I attended the advanced artillery course in the US Army, where I got to know and learn about armies from all around the globe. At that time, I saw myself sometimes as like an ambassador of the IDF and Israel. When I finished the university, I began one of the most challenging and interesting periods of my military service. I was posted as the fire support commander in the Gaza division. In that position, I was in charge of the command post that its purpose was to detect and strike terror squads that were firing rockets and mortars towards civilian Israeli areas. This kind of threat began about 10 years ago, and unfortunately is still valid today. The enemy knows that attacking our civilians is our weak spot, and they're using it all the time. I would like to shortly explain how the enemy that we're facing operates. They do not wear uniforms, they place their rocket launchers in schoolyards, mosques, and even near international aid facilities. They do all that for one reason only, and that's to put the Palestinian civilians in danger as human shields. The unique criteria about the command post I was in charge of was to combine classified intelligent means, precise striking means that could operate from air, sea or ground, together with a very special authority to conduct a strike on a very short time schedule. We were able to do our mission with minimal damage or risk to the civilian environment the enemy was operating in. I'm not here to give you a professional explanation or lecture about how the IDF operates, so I'll bring out a few examples of what I was speaking about. Like I said earlier, our main mission was tracking down and striking terror squads that shot rockets towards Israel. The rules of engagement allow us to strike those squads only after or during the act itself. That is a huge risk because many times the terrorists succeeded to fire or even kill or injure Israeli civilians before we had a chance to strike back. One of the most popular means that we used were UAVs, drones. At one opportunity, I had to stop a strike because we saw a woman that was part of the terror squad, and we thought that maybe it wasn't a terror squad because we recognized it was a woman, and we had to stop. We didn't strike them. That terror squad shot 3 rockets towards Israel, and unfortunately, we didn't strike them back. The last example is that in one of the operations in Gaza, we traced a high-ranked terror commander that was in charge of managing the fire of hundreds of rockets those days. The terrorist was driving a motorcycle, and after a long surveillance and 100% clearance that it was him, we decided to strike him from the air. Seconds before the strike, the UAV operator told me that he thinks that there might be another figure on the motorcycle, and maybe it's a little child. We didn't have a dilemma. We automatically stopped the strike, and that commander got away, and we missed the target. I can honestly say that there were several events that civilians were hurt because of our strikes, but let me assure you this fact. When it happens, the IDF will never hide it or ignore it. Unarmed civilians are accidentally hurt in some occasions. First of all, it could be collateral damage. You conduct a strike and uninvolved civilians that were around the target were injured or hurt. A human mistake, you misrecognize the target or fire at the wrong location. Unfortunately, that can happen. Or a decision to strike even though we know that we have civilians around the targets. I have quite a lot of experience in this field of interest, and I can assure you that the IDF is only in the two first spectrums. And if there were any exceptions, they were investigated and treated properly. That is the big gap and difference between us and our enemies. We don't hide behind our civilians and do not make them our protective shield. After these challenging 4 years in Gaza, I was appointed as an artillery battalion commander. As a battalion commander, you have an operational mission, but you're also the mother and father of 400 soldiers, no matter what their background is or where they come from. Yachad Leman Chayal have escorted me through this challenging position and also in the position that I am doing today. Projects like rest areas that are built in our bases, snack positions like the Tachana in Eshkol, near Gaza, Ametz Lochem, scholarships that are given to warriors after they finish their active duty, and much more that I know that your community has a huge part in it, are things that make the difference for us and for our soldiers. The primary activity that my unit did was standard protection of the lives of Israeli and Palestinian civilians that live in the West Bank. Our job is to keep a symmetric life where people can go to work or school peacefully. For the soldiers, it can be very intense, physically and psychologically. They do 8 to 12 hours shifts, usually under a lot of pressure and tense. When young soldiers, try to imagine your kids maybe, have such complex missions, I have to help them keep their mind focused on the front and not on what they left back home. You all know that the army units in Israel are composed of all kinds of soldiers, and we try to help them be equal, and that's not easy. I can honestly say that today I meet more and more soldiers that tell me about deep economic issues back home. With the cooperation with Yachad Leman Chayal, we can give them an extra personal touch that reminds them that back there, and maybe overseas, someone is thinking about them. It's hard to explain what young guys and girls are going through. Try to imagine those soldiers in the middle of the night, in a hostile environment, where rocks and sometimes Molotov bottles are being thrown at them, and they have to operate calmly and professionally. It's not easy for such young kids. The last experience I would like to share with you is my battalion's mission in the last operation in Gaza, Operation Protective Edge, Tzuk Eitan. My men fought for 45 days, shot thousands of rounds and worked day and night to give effective fire support to the maneuvering and armored and infantry units that risked their lives inside Gaza Strip. Artillery is a statistic weapon that is used usually to suppress the enemy before the maneuvering units conduct their attack. Some will say that you cannot use statistic weapon in an urban area like Gaza because of the risk to uninvolved civilians in the battlefield. Well, even though professionally it was the right thing to do, we restricted the use of artillery and used it only when our troops were in distress with wounded or even kidnapped soldiers. I have to say that even during the last war in Gaza, I met the representative from Yachad Le'man HaChayal, from Israel and abroad, that came to the field almost every day to try and reach to all the soldiers in order to provide them the extra benefit that can be given to them, that can give them the feeling that someone back there is appreciating what they're fighting for. The contribute is not only during wartime. In my current duty, we dedicate 2 or 3 events every year that are especially for soldiers that live in Israel by themselves without their family or parents. At those events, every soldier receives a special present, and it's quite exciting. A couple of months after a soldier is recruited, we conduct a Parents' Day, an event that you can imagine soldiers without family seeing all their friends, parents bringing food and goods for them. And those Chayalim, they don't have the privilege to do it by themselves. With your help, we can reach out to them and make their service much more pleasant. Again, I would like to thank you all for having me here, your attention, and the big hug that I received from this wonderful community.